Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Freshwater Stewardship Community webinar. We're very excited to have you today as we welcome back Kailey Setter from Canadian Wildlife Federation. We had her, if you've been with our FSC for a long time, we had her a couple of years ago, and we're really excited to have her back. She is from the Canadian Wildlife Federation. My name is Monica Seidel. I'm the Communications and Fundraising Manager at Watersheds Canada, and Kailey and I will be your two hosts today. If you are not familiar with Watersheds Canada as an organization, we're a registered charity based out of Perth, Ontario, and we work with community groups across the country to deliver our programs. So we have a focus on direct habitat restoration, like the two photos you can see on the left, where we do shoreline plantings and also fish habitat restoration. And then we have outreach programs like our children's programming, which I will be talking about a bit later, and also programs like our freshwater stewardship community. Our focus with both of these types of outreach programs is to directly communicate with people who are taking action in their community, help empower them, give them resources, and also just connect them together to be able to lead positive actions in their communities. If you would like to follow along with any of our programs and adventures, also all of our free resources, and just some fun content in general on social media, you can find Watersheds Canada on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. And we also regularly post to our YouTube channel, including our webinar recordings. If you have any questions after today's session or about any of our programs as you browse our website, you can reach out at info@watersheds.ca, and I would be happy to have a conversation with you. If you're interested in supporting the work of Watersheds Canada and you'd also like to get something a bit special back, we do have a symbolic adoption program where you receive artwork done by a Canadian artist for the species that you adopt. So 3 examples are on the screen here. You get a 5x7 printed postcard featuring the artwork of that animal or plant. And then you also get a blank card to give as a gift if you would like, or you can just keep the postcard for yourself. All of the adoptions come with a Canadian income tax receipt, so you would get a full donation benefit that way. And if you're interested in learning more about our adoption program and see what species are available, you can go to watersheds.ca/gifts. Our freshwater stewardship community, if you're not familiar, has been running since 2021. We have a vast library of past recordings and education handouts on our website. It's the same link that you would have gone to register for today's webinar. And all of them are grouped into different categories based on a topic of interest. So I encourage you after today's webinar to scroll down on that page below where you registered, and you'll see different menu options where you can access all of those past resources. I would like to take a moment to thank our 2025 Freshwater Stewardship Community sponsors who have given funding support. So we have the Echo Foundation, the Hodgson Family Foundation, Peterborough K.M. Hunter Charitable Foundation, and the S.M. Blair Family Foundation. Today is a jam-packed session, so I'm going to get right to introducing Kailey. Based out of Calgary, Kailey Setter is the Canadian Wildlife Federation's Experiential Education Manager, a role which focuses around connecting Canadians to nature through hands-on experience. With over 10 years of experience doing community engagement and environmental education, Kailey has a passion for connecting people with nature and finding new ways to inspire, inform, and engage. So I will pass it over to you, Kailey.
Thanks so much, Monica, and thanks everyone for joining today. It's really fantastic to have so many people taking part. I think as we head into summer, we're all really thinking about how we can get outside. Nature activities for family fun this summer. And so I'm going to walk you through some ideas. We'll chat about some of the things that you can get up to. And we'll talk about it kind of from 3 different levels. What you can do close to home, because it's really hard sometimes to get out, really far out of the city or out of town. So what are some things you can do close to home? What are some things you can do in your neighborhood, your town, your local community? And what are some things you can do if you do have time and you want to get further afield? So I'll jump right in and just talk about first life outside and why it's so important to spend time in nature. I think so many of us can really appreciate that, when we do get the chance to spend time outside and particularly in nature, we just feel better. And science and research has shown that time in nature really has so many mental and emotional benefits for our mood. We might be really stressed or feeling really down, and just some time spent in nature really helps us balance that. The physical benefits, we get moving, we get active. So many jobs these days, and even in schools, like you're sitting for so long. To get up and get moving is really good for our physical health as well. And then, of course, social benefits. When you get outside, and especially when you get outside as a family, you're talking and you're sharing. If you're in your community, joining community events, you're making connections with neighbors. And we were talking earlier about, thinking back to COVID and some of the things that were really hard. These are the things, the mental and emotional stress, the lack of social interaction. And I think for young people, especially in schools, like they were learning from home and they weren't having these opportunities. And I think it really drove home the value of being outside and connecting with nature and connecting with each other. So there are so many benefits, and I'm sure many of you already know this and are feeling it, but it's been documented. There's tons of research showing that. But what you maybe don't know is that research has also shown you need to spend really at least 2 hours a week in nature to reap those benefits. So there was a really interesting study in 2019 where they kind of surveyed people and saw, like, is there a threshold for when you start to get the benefits of being in nature? And, there's no hard and fast rule, but this particular study found that it's 2 hours per week. And what's interesting about that, it doesn't have to be all at one chunk, like a 2-hour chunk. You could split it up into 20 minutes, half an hour kind of, and it still resulted in the same benefits. So that's really reassuring. It doesn't take a lot for us to feel these benefits, but if you're not spending at least 2 hours outside a week, maybe you're not going to feel it. So it's a mindful for us to make the time to fit these nature moments in. And that's what we'll talk about today, because it's easier said than done, right? Where am I going to find this time? What am I going to do? And we'll talk a bit about that. So the big question, how do I get my family outside? We're busy, and, depending on whether you have young kids or older, maybe you have grandparents, things like trying to figure out schedules can be really hard. Really, it's about making it a family habit. It doesn't have to be this big thing you do, like we're going on an expedition into nature and it's going to be a whole day. It could be part of your daily routine. So maybe it's a walk, a daily walk or morning or something like that. Something you schedule time in your calendar for and make sure you're doing together. And you can keep it simple. It doesn't, like I said, have to be really complicated. It could be something in your neighborhood or, again, in your backyard or kind of close to home. But the other thing, too, I would suggest is embracing unstructured time. I think so much nowadays, a lot of our time, even outside, is structured, especially with families. It could be you're taking kids to soccer or, organized sports. Usually when we go out, and I'm guilty of this, you have a plan. We're going to do this, 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 and this, and it's going to take this long. But really, sometimes the best thing is unstructured time, that time to be curious and creative and just follow your interests. So you don't need an agenda. You can kind of go to these outdoor spaces and just be. And I think that's really hard for some people. I work with teachers and educators and families, and sometimes the hardest thing we can do is sit still and just kind of be quiet and pay attention to our surroundings. So I really invite you and encourage you to embrace that unstructured time too. So you can plan your activity out, but maybe also just like find a tree and sit out under it. And we'll talk a bit about that. And then maybe letting kids get involved in leading, embracing that spontaneity and following their curiosity instead of, if you're the parent or the adult planning, say, what are you interested in? What would you like to do? And help them be involved in the process. And that kind of helps foster a bit of buy-in as well, as opposed to like, hey, we're going to do this. And the kids saying, oh, no, here we go again. Like, mom and dad are telling us this is what we have to do. So, these are just some basic tips. There's tons of resources online as well, but just to kind of get us in the headspace of that. And so with that, I really just thought we could give you some ideas. That's what this whole session's really about. It's about giving you ideas and kind of sparks to help you think, oh, this would work for me in my situation. Because not everything will. People have jobs. Sometimes you're really busy in the summer and you have to carve out this time. That's okay. Take this as a chance to just think about opportunities and then take the ones that you think might fit in with your situation and maybe experiment. You don't have to try everything that we highlight, but maybe pick one or two that you get excited about. And so with that, I want to start off with a really, really straightforward activity that maybe most of us have done, which is planning a picnic. I think this is one of those things probably doesn't need a lot of description, but picnics are a fantastic, accessible way to get outside. You don't have to, for anyone with reduced mobility, you can do a picnic and pick a location that's as convenient. You can do these in your backyard. You can do them in local parks. You can do them further afield. And really, it doesn't require a lot of equipment or items. Oh, sorry. So if you look at the list, like you're going to need some food and drinks, maybe something to carry your food in, some ice packs, some of the basic utensils, blankets, tablecloths, ideally machine washable because they'll get dirty. And then just some basic things like sunscreen, bug spray, trash bags, because of course we want to make sure we're leaving no trace whenever we go in nature. So not leaving garbage or things behind. But this is really fun because you can get your family involved in planning or picking the foods out. You can find a location that works for you. And it's part of your everyday anyway. You have to have a meal, you've got to eat. So why not just take that outside? So when we talk about what you can do close to home, think about your backyard picnics or barbecues. Why not just take your meal outside? Ideally somewhere, in a natural setting, but this is such a summer thing. So it's outdoor time, right? Get outside, eat your meal outside, plan those outdoor picnics and barbecues. And then of course, if you want to get a little bit further afield into your community, you can go picnic in a park. I encourage you to check out your municipality. I know I live here in Calgary and you can book picnic sites if you've got big groups. Some of them come equipped with barbecues. So if you want to have, amenities available, to understand kind of where you can go and what's allowed. But it's such a popular thing. And I know here in Calgary, especially, see tons of new Canadians out as well. So where some people might not feel comfortable, climbing up the mountain or going out to the lake, a picnic is just so accessible. And it's a great way to get friends and family out who maybe wouldn't necessarily want to go out as well. I mean, food is that great bridge for everybody. And then for those of you who are thinking picnic, I've been on a picnic. This is not that exciting. There's actually this thing called adventure picnicking, which I find really interesting. And essentially, there's really extreme adventure picnicking, but it's just this idea of new foods in new places. So trying something really new, like maybe making bannock on the fire, which is an indigenous bread, or going somewhere you've never been before and having a picnic in a unique place. So you can really take it to a higher level if you're like, okay, well, I want to get out of my backyard. I want to go somewhere. Maybe finding a really interesting location, doing some research, helping or getting your kids or family involved in planning out some unique food to try. You can really make it an adventure, even though it's a really simple activity. So I wanted to start off with a simple one, but the humble picnic, don't forget about a picnic. The second one, also pretty common for people, is gardening. And at the Canadian Wildlife Federation, we love gardening. We're big fans, particularly wildlife-friendly gardening. So planting native plants that attract wildlife and pollinators. And this is great because so many people have balcony gardens, even windowsill plants, or if you have a backyard and you have a space to plant things, this is a great way to create a space that you can go out into, but also to engage your family in getting outside. So, some of the things, as I'm sure you need some containers or spaces that you can do your planting in, soil and seedlings. And ideally, if you can be picking things that are local to your area, they'll do better. Local native plants are better adapted to local environments, so you might not have to water them as much. They're more drought resistant, which, summers are getting hotter, so something to keep in mind. And then, your basic gardening tools, trowels and rakes and watering cans and gloves. And this is an activity where you can and will get dirty. So we always want to be mindful with young kids that, they're wearing the clothes that we don't mind getting dirty. Sunscreen, bug spray. And then I will point out too, and I think we'll share this after the webinar, that CWF does have some great resources to help you get kids and youth out. And we do have an activity booklet called Little Green Sprouts that's full of hands-on activities that you can do in the garden. So lots of, make a old rubber boot into a planter, making picture frames out of flowers, different little arts and crafts types activities. But I know not everyone has access to outdoor green space, depending on where you live and what neighborhoods. Sometimes it's at a premium. But it could be as simple as a container garden. And so maybe you plant something in a container out on a deck, or if you have a backyard. For young children, sensory gardens are really great because, of course, they want to touch things and they want to put things in their mouth. So if you can have things that smell like mint or different vegetables, things that are fuzzy, then you can go out in the garden with young kids and you can really make it a sensory experience. What do we hear and what do we feel? And if you have things that are appropriate, what can we taste? And it just is a really nice way to connect with nature really close to home. And don't diminish these small things, right? Because of course we think nature and we think go out into the wilderness. But when you're talking about those 2 hours a week, like 20 minutes in the garden, that's fantastic. That really helps get you there. And it's something that's really a lot easier for some people to do than to plan an outdoor trip. That said, if you want to go a bit further, community gardens are fantastic. Maybe you don't have a space in your home, but community gardens are these places where you can get a bed within the community space and grow things. So maybe you can use that as an opportunity for growing your own or visiting community gardens. Sometimes the community gardens put on events or have days where the community comes out to help take care of the garden. And so you can engage your family and taking part in that. And a great way to connect with some of your neighbors and some really cool experts who are really passionate about it. So if you want to learn something too, either you as an adult or with your family, it's just a nice way to share some of that knowledge because some people who have been gardening are just a wealth of information. And then if you're even more ambitious, you can really even, and this is great for older youth or adults, probably less so for really young ones, but you can think about maybe joining a habitat restoration project, which is taking this concept of gardening kind of even further into restoration. And I know Watersheds Canada is really big on, looking at lakeside properties. We have Love Your Lake program where we're looking at how do you have natural shorelines, but also other nonprofits and charity groups are working to do restoration projects by planting trees. And so with a little bit of research in your area, you can maybe come across one of these projects and you can sign up to volunteer. And then you're getting outside, you're contributing to an amazing cause by helping with conservation. And you're also, again, connecting with so many people from your community and maybe further afield. So a really cool learning opportunity to learn more about some of the conservation work, whether it's on individual properties or in parks and public areas as well. And so the next one I want to highlight is one maybe not everyone thinks of, but it's really nice because as we all know, a lot of the summers now are getting hotter and it's really hard to get active when it's really hot in the day. So one alternative maybe for your family and yourself is to get out at night. And it's really, really cool to get out and do some stargazing in the summer. Everyone thinks, okay, well, you need a telescope and you need binoculars and you have to know what you're looking at. But that's not true at all. You can make it a simple experience. I think depending on how far afield you're going, bringing some blankets and lawn chairs makes it more comfortable looking up, because obviously that strains your neck after a while. Kids love it when you're like pillows and soft blankets and any, your bedtime comforts, like maybe teddy bears and things. It just makes it special if you're going outside. Obviously insect repellent, because insects can be active at dusk and at nighttime. So that's still prevalent, less so sunscreen. You might need warm clothes depending on the temperature. And then always snacks and drinks. Food and snacks wins everybody over. And then you generally don't want to have bright lights when you're going out at night, because it wrecks your night vision. So they have these things called red filtered flashlights or headlamps, and they're just, you maybe seen them. Sometimes when you get a headlamp, you can press the button, it'll go, bright, flashing, and then it'll go red. That's what that's for. It's much easier on our night vision, so you'll be able to see the sky much better. And the thing to remember with young kids taking out, they'll go out and say, I can't see anything. It takes like 15 minutes or so for your eyes to adjust to the dark. So there's got to be some level of patience until that happens. But once you do, your eyes start to pick up more on the different stars and such. So that's just a little tip. Make sure you kind of wait out that first 15 minutes, because you won't see things right away until your eyes adjust. And that's what those red filtered lights are for, so that you don't have to then readjust to the lighting. And then there's all kinds of tools. A star finder is like a little tool that helps you identify what's in the sky. It's a little bit more manual, like you hold it in your hands and you rotate it based on the time of day to see where the constellation should be. But the alternative to that, that's more tech savvy, is the Stellarium app. But I'm not sure if anyone's heard of Stellarium, but it's really cool open source information where you type in your location and it will tell you where everything will be in the sky at any given time. And so if you're looking and you say, I don't know what that is in the sky, you could look up the sky on the Stellarium app and you can see what it is. So what's that bright dot? Oh, actually it's a planet, and it will tell you that. So if you do want to be a bit techie, you can check out Stellarium, but there's also those old school star finders that are really fun to have in hand, and of course, screen free. And then binoculars and telescopes are great, but optional. If you don't really know how to use them and you don't know what you're looking at, you don't really need them. But once you learn a bit, they're really fantastic to seeing deeper into space. And so if you're interested in getting your kind of feet wet with stargazing, you can start with at-home astronomy. I always love making a star bag with kids. So you put your snacks and your blanket and your books and your binoculars and your headlamp in, and you make a thing of it, and then you're going out and you're looking at the sky and just kind of seeing what you notice, pointing things out. You might see satellites. In the city, especially, I live in Calgary, it's quite bright because of the sky glow, but I can still see things. I can still see the Big Dipper in the north. I can still see the Summer Triangle, which is the three of the brightest stars in the sky. So you'll probably still see things. And for young ones, like that could be enough. They're not going to want to be out there for hours and hours because their attention isn't really high. So you could look at the sky for a little bit, read a star-themed story or book, have a star-themed snack, and by that point, maybe they're ready for bed. So young ones, like, that's great. Just get out there for a little while. Again, doesn't have to be big chunks. For those who are looking for kind of a bit more in-depth experience, star parties are fantastic. I don't know if any of you have heard of star parties, but this was really great for me. I always loved looking at the sky and had no idea what I was looking at. And it wasn't until I joined a local star party that I started to learn about more of the constellations. And so the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, also called RASC, they have a number of different chapters across the country where they have volunteers who are just passionate about astronomy and the night sky. And every so often they'll host events where they come and they do a camp out, and you can join them, and they'll set up their telescopes. And some of them have massive, massive telescopes where you can see galaxies and nebula, and it is just mind-blowing. And they're really encouraging for kids because these people love talking about what they're doing. So I remember when I went, we would just kind of walked around to see who was willing to let us look through their telescopes. And we got to see like I said, nebula and different things that you couldn't see with your eyes or even with a binocular. So that's really fun. And there's a social element too, because they do talks, they have barbecues. And so I really encourage you, if you're interested in learning a bit more, to check out the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada and see about some of their local star parties. They have a lot more in the summer. I will note too, I don't know if anyone knows, but the Perseid meteor shower is a fantastic summer meteor shower. Happens generally in July to August. I think it peaks August 13th this year. And then you can actually see meteors. And that is really, really great because it gives you something else to look at in the sky. So check that out. And then for those who are really wanting to get further out, dark sky places are really great. Again, the Royal Astronomical Society has designated these spaces. Usually it's parks, protected areas, and they have different classifications, but they're truly dark spaces where you can see like the Milky Way and all that. Jasper National Park is one, for example. Terra Nova National Park. These are truly dark spaces. If you want to go out there, some of them do have festivals, but you can also just get out to these really amazing dark spaces and see the sky like you've probably never seen it before. I think too, was it Monica, do you have some dark sky related materials at Watersheds Canada? I think they've got a backpack too.
Yeah, so a sneak peek to later in the presentation, but this year we did release with two of our backpack groups a night sky and navigation themed backpack. So this is a great starting point for families who, like Kailey said, maybe have never thought to look up at the sky or don't know any of the names of anything and it feels very intimidating. And this is a great entry point into that. So that will be talked about in a little bit later in the presentation.
That's awesome. So basically, they do the work for you, giving you books and things. Some libraries have those as well, so check out your local libraries. But I think the Fraser Valley Library in BC, they even have telescopes you can take out from the library. So some really cool resources for stargazing. So from stargazing on, I don't know if everyone's heard of geocaching. This is slightly more complicated, but another really fantastic way to get outside. Geocaches are essentially like treasure hunts. You know, they're hiding these little boxes. Some of them, especially the family-friendly ones, can be filled with little toys and things. There's usually a log book, so you can log when you find the treasure because you re-hide it. And so it's a great way to get out for a walk. They have them in towns. They have them further afield. Some people are really adamant geocachers, and I have someone I work with who was, going and hitting geocaches in so many different places. But yeah, they can be really close to home. So what you need for a geocache kind of varies on where you're going, but generally it's a GPS or a smartphone to help you navigate to find it, because there's usually coordinates and hints to help you along the way. So a bit low tech is the GPS, obviously a bit more tech savvy is the smartphone. And there's free geocaching accounts on geocaching.com. So you set up an account and you can find different geocaches, and they're actually categorized by size. You can have large ones, medium, small, and they have micro. And I once tried to find a micro geocache and I couldn't, because they're just little. They're like tiny little geocaches for those who want the challenge. So wide range of skills and abilities. Depending on the age of your family, like you might want to go for something more challenging, or you might want to stick to those nice big ones that you know what you're looking at when you see it. And then, of course, anytime you're going out, make sure you're packing, some drinks, snacks, your sunscreen, bug spray, you're dressing for being outside. You want to have a pen or pencil. They usually have one in the geocache, but just so you can log that you found the cache. And then sometimes you bring tradable items. So if you're going to take an item from a geocache, you generally put something in. These are like those small dollar store things, little toys that we get. It's really fun for kids to get something and then they can leave something. And so families who are thinking, we've got a million toys in our house, maybe grab up some of the small ones and then you can swap them out when you find the cache. And so when I think at home, obviously we're maybe not geocaching in the same sense because this is on your own property or in your own place. But for young kids, you can start with a scavenger hunt. right? You can create something that they go out looking for. This one that's pictured is an example of a color-based one. So find something red, orange, yellow, green, blue. That's a lot easier for young kids. Again, attention spans too, like keep it short, don't make it too hard, don't hide the things too tricky because they just get frustrated. But a geocache, a scavenger hunt, it's the same idea. It's just a lot more low tech. And even for older kids and adults, who doesn't love a good scavenger hunt, especially if you're on teams? I know when I was a teenager, my family, we would all camp together and we would do family scavenger hunts and we'd have to team up. And we got very competitive about it. And it was very interesting, but it was always such a fun, formative memory of those times where we were outside doing these things together. And we'd have prizes and things to keep the motivation high, but really it was all about the glory. So a scavenger hunt, you can always start with that. Again, if you want to get further out into your community, there's tons of geocaches around. I went with a friend one time here in Calgary, and we went out to find a couple of geocaches in one of the local parks, and we could find a few because some of these areas, it's not just one. You can find a few different ones, which makes it a bit of a longer outing. And it is kind of fun. It's like something in us that always gets excited when we find a treasure. We're like, yay, we found the treasure. So, for all ages, I really encourage you to check out geocaching. It's a great way to, get those steps in, but be getting outside. And then if you are like, okay, I've been geocaching, I've done it, you can always create your own cache as well. There's sort of some rules around it because obviously if you're making a geocache, you have to maintain it. On the website I mentioned, they talk a bit about that. If you're interested, we'll share the links so you can learn more about how to do it. But you can create your own treasure chest and you write the clues and you help people find it. And you can either do that officially on the geocache app or even just for your family. You could make one and hide it in your home. It just takes a little more planning, but again, a really great way to kind of level up your geocache by actually becoming somebody who creates their own. Okay, so maybe switching gears a little bit. When we think summer, I think we also all think beach. It's tricky because I live in Calgary. We don't have a lot of beaches, but depending where you are in the country, we kind of mean beach in a loose term. Some of you are lucky enough to be in lake country and maybe you've got sandy or rocky beaches. Some are in coastal areas. For those of you who aren't, there's lots of ways to visit the beach this summer. Some of the things you'll need, of course, we're talking swimsuits, but obviously for those toddlers, you've got swim diapers and such, sun hat, sunscreen, your beach towels, your sun shelters and umbrellas for the shade. Toys are really fantastic and really durable. They seem to last forever with the shovels and buckets. So those are really nice to have. And then some snacks. And again, I'm going to pitch Canadian Wildlife Federation. We have a set of activity cards for Day at the Beach. And again, it's just activities you can do in these kind of coastal or aquatic settings. Things like, looking at the water, building things in the sand, really hands-on stuff to get kids engaged. So we'll share those activity cards with you. But let's think about beach in terms of backyards, sandboxes and water tables. They're fantastic. They're messy, so you've got to plan accordingly. When you get out in nature, you have to be willing to get messy sometimes. But, you can have, if you have a space that you can have sand, sometimes you're lucky to have a built structure or even those little ones you can get from the store that you fill with sand. That's just another example of, going to the beach close to home. And water tables are really great sensory. So while maybe your teen might not be playing in the sand pit, maybe they will, but young kids, those sensory activities are really great because they teach hand-eye coordination, motor skills. So these are really fantastic developmental opportunities as well for the young ones. So, again, think beach. Yeah, maybe think water tables and sandboxes when you're thinking close to home, or if there's one in the local schoolyard, you can kind of visit that and enjoy playing in the sand or in the water. Be careful, obviously, with water in the community because you need it to be a safe space and things tend to live in water. So make sure, even if you have water tables, you're cleaning them out regularly, right? Because things like to live in wet spaces. So fill it with fresh water and then make sure to drain it when you're done. And then if we're thinking urban communities or just like neighborhoods, where's somewhere safe I can take kids that's water related. Obviously, there's community pools and such, but also splash parks and spray pads. Maybe less natural. I mean, hopefully you've got some that have some trees and some shade as well. Some of them can be highly built up, but even time outside, we say, time outside in nature is like ideal, but even time outside is really fantastic. And it's a great way to cool off. As we keep saying, summers are getting hotter. Not everyone has air conditioning. So getting out for a little while to one of these sites in your community or urban area is also really great. That's time outside. And then, of course, actually going to a beach if you have one nearby, driving to one. Beaches come in all different forms, so make sure you check out online. If you're going to a park, they'll usually have advisories about whether you can go in the water, if it's safe to or not, whether the beaches are manned by lifeguards or not, tidal information. Like, you just want to make sure you know where you're going and get some information on that. And when you're in those outdoor settings too, if you're traveling, there's obviously a lot more prep about bringing materials and, making sure you've got everything you need for your outdoor excursion. But there's tons of information available online. It can, varies across the country, but parks and protected areas and all these have a lot of information on the beaches, access points where you can go, etc. So yeah, just a little bit more research required, but obviously so great to be able to get out to these actual beach areas. Whether it's on the lake or on the shoreline. And then the other one I want to mention is birding. And I really love birding because unlike other wildlife species, birds are some of the species that we can see pretty much everywhere. If you're right in the city, you're not going to see a lot of wildlife, but you probably will still see birds. And so birding, again, is a really accessible way to spend time in nature and learn a bit about wildlife as well. And again, it can be really low key, or you can be suited up if you want with gear. So at the very base level, I mean, you can go out there and just use your eyes. It's really nice to have a bird ID guide, and ideally one that's local to your area. I know when I was growing up, we had a North American bird guide, and that was endlessly frustrating because half of those birds were not in Alberta. But if you can get a local bird guide with even just some of the basic birds, that's really helpful. They have like a lot of visual fold out ones that are laminated, which is great because if you drop it in the mud, you just give it a wipe off. They're light, much easier to carry than a big book. So you can have some cards, or if you want, again, talking technology, iNaturalist and eBird are online apps that you can use to log observations of birds. So you can take pictures and upload photos, and then this community of people will help you identify what you're seeing. But also, you can go online to iNaturalist, for example, type in your location and kind of filter by birds, and it'll tell you what you can expect to see in your area, which is helpful because what I've done with young kids is then you print off a list of some of the most common birds, and it becomes a bit of a scavenger hunt. Like, can we find this bird? Have we seen this one? And you can make it a bit of a challenge to spot all the birds that have been seen in your area. So that's an option. A notebook and a pencil if you want to do a little nature journaling or draw the birds you're seeing or write a story. It's just a nice way to reflect. If you like art, that's a great way to kind of bring those art skills in. You can have binoculars, but again, you don't need them. If you don't know how to use binoculars, they can be really frustrating. And so for young kids, usually they can't see anything through them anyway. So if you want, you can bring them and kind of practice using them. But one thing I often do with really young kids is make toilet paper binoculars. So you take 2 toilet paper rolls and you kind of tape them together and you put a string on. And they're not magnifying anything, but it does help young kids focus. So if you put, your binoculars up like this, your toilet paper ones, even that is focusing your vision forward. So, kids aren't looking everywhere. They're looking at something purposefully. So if you want to get them to practice with really young kids, you can incorporate that craft by making toilet paper binoculars and then getting them to focus on spots. And then as they get older, you can start to introduce them to real binoculars, which require you to do some adjustments to get the vision proper. But again, optional. You can look at birds from afar. You don't have to have those things. And then, of course, too, I'll mention certain times of the year, winter, spring, bird feeders are really fantastic. Birds don't generally need support with feeding in the summer because there's lots of vegetation. But they do appreciate some added support in the winter and the spring. And if you have a bird feeder with bird seed, that might attract some birds that then you can look at. And that picture there in front of you of the blue jay is actually from my mother's house. She gets some really fantastic birds because she had a bird feeder out this winter. And so she was just sending me pictures of all the great birds that she saw. And I was very jealous. So backyard birding, again, another picture from my mom. My mom got so into birding that she thought, I'm going to buy one of those Bluetooth bird feeder cameras. So this is a shot from her bird feeder that she took. This is, I think it's a grosbeak, an evening grosbeak. But essentially, she's pretty lucky. She's got a very natural area, so she's seeing some different species. But even I live in Calgary, and there's a magpie nest just outside of my house, and I can watch the magpies. And I've seen some robins. So there's some common species that you can go out looking for. Ideally, and this is a bit tricky depending on your age group, you're going to see more activity in the morning and evening. I think anyone who sleeps with the window open can maybe hear the birds get really active at like 4 or 5 in the morning. So if you're really keen and your family's up for it, getting out early is not only good for seeing birds, but also beating that summer heat we keep talking about. But you'll still see birds throughout the day. So you can kind of plan accordingly based on what the birds are in your area. And then if you want to take it further, there's some really fantastic birding walks that happen around in different communities. I know here in Calgary, I was looking at the Calgary Recreation site, and they have a bird walk that you can join with an expert and other community members, and they'll teach you what to look for. And again, that's just a really great social opportunity, an opportunity to learn from somebody, because sometimes we feel intimidated. Like, I can't go out. I don't know anything about birds. Go out with people who know about birds. They're so excited to talk about it, much like the star parties and how they love astronomy. You join a bird walk, you're going with birders. They'll tell you all about the birds, and you'll leave with a lot more knowledge than you started. And then if you have the ability to, and you want to kind of take it up a notch, you can even go further afield to a bird observatory. In Alberta here, we have Beaver Hills Bird Observatory. I know in New Brunswick, I think it's New Brunswick, they have Johnson Mills, where the shorebirds come. There's a lot of great places where you can come and learn about birds. And sometimes they even have ambassador birds. So that's that picture there with the saw-whet owl, the little owl on her head, is one of the ambassador birds at the Beaver Hills, which is up in the Boreal, and that's where these birds live. And so really interesting opportunity for kids to learn about birds and maybe even see some really cool ones firsthand. I know there's some places that have wildlife rehabilitation, and they can't release the birds back, and so they'll talk to people about them, and you get to learn more about some of these really cool ones that maybe you don't see in your immediate community. So thinking about maybe doing a quick online search, where are some of the bird observatories near me? Where are some of the cool birding spots? Because sometimes they have educational programs. They have things where you can go out at night and help with bird banding in some cases. So, for some of the older kids who want to maybe do some skill building or even resume building, to have these experiences that are, volunteering and learning more about birds, that's really, really great as well. And I think before I move on too, I think Watersheds Canada has some really good bird-related resources as well. Sorry, I keep calling on you, Monica, but do you have some of the other ones that are worth highlighting here around birding in particular?
Yeah, so when I share my presentation, I'll have some of those resources in there. But just like we have the Night Sky backpack, we also have a Things with Wings backpack. So that includes birds, bats, and bugs, and lots of really interesting ways to connect kids with nature. Like Kailey said, birds are one of the most common things that children interact with no matter where they are. And so we find it's a great entry point to have kids learn how to identify them, but also fun things like how to sing back to the birds, how to tell birds apart based on their different features and adaptations. And then, of course, you get into a lot of art-based programs for where the birds live, making your own bird, and things like that. So I will share those shortly after you finish, Kailey.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I was joking with Monica that I said when I go places and they have these backpacks for kids, I also like to get the backpacks because, adults are just big kids as well. So all of these things that are like hands-on activities, I get so excited about because it just makes it so much more interactive. And even if you can learn something along the way, and we talked about how it can be unstructured time in nature, but sometimes you do want to get out and you want to try new things and learn new things. And that's such a great way to do it. So I know this is such a quick list and it's not an exhaustive list, but those are a few ideas just to get you thinking about what you could do outside, what might work with your family, what might work with your schedule. But before I pass things back to Monica, I thought it would be really good to touch quickly on some of the tips to beat the summer heat. Because when we think about getting out in the summer, we do have to be mindful of safety and preparedness. So just a quick reminder, make sure you're checking those weather forecasts and the air quality forecasts. There's certainly been a lot of smoke from wildfires this summer already. And so we have to be mindful if the air quality is at a high alert, that might not be the best day to get out. Don't let that stop you from getting out. Just plan ahead. I think, things like this are having to have us think more strategically about when and where we're getting out. But just pay attention to those alerts. If it's too hot, the humidex is too high, or the air quality is really bad, maybe think about planning it for another day. But you can obviously plan around it, and also time of day can help a lot with those things. Limiting your sun exposure. So seeking out shady areas, treed areas and areas with water are naturally cooling. So in urban areas, like when you've got lots of pavement, it's way, way hotter than if you're going into a natural area. So just naturally going to nature, you're going to find some cooler spots, but make sure you find some shade or bring it with you. Using that sunscreen with SPF 30 or higher, just to make sure you're protecting against the UV rays. And again, avoiding being active at the hottest time of day. If we don't get out the door right away, we think, okay, well now it's 11 and now we're going, and maybe you won't get to the place until 1. I've been there. That's not the best time to go on your big hike. Maybe instead planning in the afternoon to do the gentler, unstructured activities. We're going to sit under the tree. We're going to read a book. We're going to, spend time in a low intensity way. And if you're planning a big hike or a walk or something that requires more energy, do it in the morning or do it in the evening once the temperature is a bit better. That'll just make everyone happier, and you hopefully won't have kids saying, this is terrible, I hate this forever, I'm never doing it again. And of course, staying hydrated. And hydrated means water. We all love a lemonade and summer drinks, but sugary drinks are not as hydrating. And so making sure you have lots of water when you're out. And of course, just dressing for that sun protection. Hats and sunglasses, loose-fitting, light-colored clothes. I know we love a black shirt because it's slimming, but at the same time, it's going to absorb those heat rays. So if you want to stay cool, wear light colored clothing. It also helps if you're out in the spring for things like ticks. It's just more visible if you can see different wildlife on you. And these, just being aware of the risks. That shouldn't stop you from getting outside, but when you're aware of some of the things and you're planning accordingly, that really helps. So yeah, just things to consider as you're planning. Don't let it stop you from getting outside, but a little bit of planning goes a long way in helping you have a good experience. And not to digress too much, but they talk a lot about like what makes people feel like they can do things outdoors. And a lot of it's that confidence. And if we have bad experiences outside or negative ones or things were hard, we're less likely to do it or try it again. So make it easier for yourself. Don't try to take your family on a big excursion at the wrong time of day with the wrong stuff. And then everyone is grumpy and terrible and, feeling disgruntled and you're thinking, I'll never do it again. Start small. Work it into your calendar, do stuff that's easy and work your way up. Or if you have a family that's used to being outdoors, then maybe weave in some new opportunities. But don't feel like you have to go from 0 to 60. Again, going back to those 2 hours a week, it can be in chunks or it can be little increments. And you still get those same benefits, even if it's split out over smaller amounts of time. So with that, before I hand it back to Monica, I just want to say, I hope you all get the chance to get outdoors this summer, get out, try some new activities, spend time with your families. And if you're taking pictures and sharing them, we really encourage you to tag us in your summer adventures. So Canadian Wildlife Federation is on all the social media platforms, as well as Watersheds Canada. I know that, you're not always thinking the first thing I got to do is share my photos, but we love seeing pictures of what you're up to. And of course, we're always happy to chat about resources and share ideas. And as I mentioned, you'll be getting a list of some of those things at the end of the webinar. So with that, I'll hand it back to Monica.
Perfect. Thank you, Kailey. So I'm going to go over here. So for the last little bit here, I wanted to share some resources specifically that Watersheds Canada has available to people that they could use to access local nature, but also if you happen to have a cottage that you go to throughout the summer, you could have these activities ready to go with you for those adventures. And I'll also be sharing some of the products that we use in our own programming that we have found really resonate with kids. They're really excited to always use them, and they might be something that your family can benefit from having as well. So the first one that got alluded to a couple of times in today's presentation was Watersheds Canada's Nature Discovery Backpack Program. So this is a lending library program. It comes in two pieces for most groups. So a physical backpack full of science equipment and a custom-made locally relevant activity book. And then often groups are now requesting what we call a permanent collection. So that's the photo on the left. And this is additional books for the library as well as equipment. So binoculars, microscopes, telescopes, planetariums, things that people would use after they've checked out a backpack, most likely. They find something that's really of interest to them and they want to go deeper. And so they can use this permanent collection to do that. We have over 15 lending libraries across Canada so far, which have reached 3,200 students in 4 provinces. And we are currently looking for new groups that might be interested in launching in 2026 and 2027. So if you are belonging to a community group, a public library, maybe another charity that does programming with children and youth, and you think this might be of interest to you, please visit the link on the site. And as Kailey's mentioned, we're going to be putting all of the links from today's presentation in a handout that goes to you along with today's recording. But I would really recommend that you reach out to me through that site. There's a form you can fill in for more information, and we can talk about how we might be able to bring this program to your community. The backpacks themselves have different themes. So the one in the middle here is just a general nature one. Kailey mentioned we have the night sky one, which is the photo on the right here, but there's also geology, things with wings, forest life, and splish splash. So lots of different ways to tap into those interests that families and young kids would have. We also have a number of free resources on our website. So we have activity books, different handouts, and also lesson plans, which not necessarily that parents and grandparents need a lesson plan, but it can help you have a bit of structure. If you know you have kids for a week or for a weekend, then you can have a couple of things in the back of your pocket that you can pull out. And all of these are available for free on our website as well. The resources on this specific site are for grades K to 6, but they are tied to different themes that ideally the children in your life would have learned that past school year. So it can be a good refresher, but taking what they've learned out of the classroom, making it practical for what's in their community. We also have a number of resources that are available tied more to climate change and things that people are seeing happening in their community that they want to be able to take action on. So one of the things we have on our website is a curated toolkit. The initial funding was to empower faith communities to lead greening projects, but obviously that is not restricted to just that kind of group. It can be for anyone or for individual families. And so there are hundreds of resources on our website that are tied to 10 different topics. So we would encourage you to check those out and find one that maybe is important to your family or something that's happening in your community and you would like to take a next step towards action. We also have resources like shoreline assessments that are adapted for children and youth so they can start to see what's happening in my community, what's changing, and what can we do about it to protect these important natural areas in our community. So you can find lots of different resources around that on our website as well. Kailey mentioned a couple of different community science or citizen science apps. We always promote them. We usually link them to something called a BioBlitz, which is just a time limit that everyone goes out and tries to find as many different species as possible. And then you're writing it down on a checklist. You can submit these sightings to different apps or online databases. And so we always recommend this as a great entry point for families. If they know that their children are so into snakes and turtles, then they can plug them into a BioBlitz that is specifically looking for those species and then contributing sightings to an online database, which helps with scientific research. We also find that tactile is the way to go with kids. They want to be in the dirt, they want to be touching things, smelling things, holding in their hands. And so we found a couple different tactile discovery toys and science equipment that we find really work well with kids. One of them is called Let's Roll. So this is the top left and the top right. They have different themes, and you roll them in the mud, Play-Doh, sand, whatever you have available to you, and it gets conversation started about the relationship between animals and their homes. What do they need to eat? What do they need to hide in? What do they do when they start having a family? And so these are really great tactile. They're kind of like clay material. Sorting maps, magnifiers are really great. The magnifiers on the screen actually don't have glass or plastic, but like Kailey said, having a frame that can help children focus is really great. And then these bottom two are on the left here are from a Canadian company called Treefort Toys. They do sensory scavenger hunt discs and dice, and we found they're a really fun way. Instead of having that paper and clipboard, this is something you can just throw in a backpack or in a pocket and still get the same type of curiosity and questions out of your children. In terms of nighttime discovery, this is something we found that more and more people are interested in. We've had a lot of exciting events happen the last couple of years with the eclipse and, of course, northern lights coming further south into the country. And so this can be a great way to engage your family. We'll be releasing a ton of new resources later this summer around the nighttime exploration theme of our backpack. But there are also just some general things that you can do that require basically no equipment. So something like going mothing, where you're putting up a large white sheet and then bright lights to attract those moths and see what exists in your area. Of course, the classic watching and looking at fireflies, or going moonbathing, which is the opposite if people have heard of forest bathing, but you're just doing it at night with the moon and the stars. And then an owl prowl, of course, is a fun one because it's at least one of the animals that I've been able to learn the sounds and calls of, and they actually answer you back. And so it'd be quite a fun activity for children where they're really still and listening to the nature around them and then trying to call back to those owls. A great starting point is story decks. So these are two on the screen here, campfire stories, one adapted for children and one for adults. And it can help get the conversation going if maybe you've never been around a campfire or your children are shy and they don't know what to contribute to a story. They're fun prompts with different animals and pictures that they can use to help their story making. Outdoor activities, things like sit spots, sound maps, or life in a square. Again, having a bit of a scaffolding around an activity, but still allowing for that inquiry and curiosity is really great for families. We always recommend flashcards or something small that children can use and hold up against something that they're actually seeing in nature. Borrowing things from your public library. They don't just have books anymore, as Kailey said. They have lots of gear, outdoor gear, and also science equipment. So checking in before you go on an outdoor adventure, even if it's just to the park, you can bring these extra items, but it lowers the financial barrier to trying something new or learning about a new topic. And then scavenger hunts, of course, bingo cards. This doesn't just need to be an animal checklist. This can be about things that you see, colors, as Kailey mentioned, animal behaviors and adaptations. This is really fun for young kids because then you can get them to come back and act out what they saw the animals doing. It can also be smells or sounds, which helps maybe calm down in the middle of the day because they have to really pay attention to what's around them. So that is a quick overview of what we came up with for ideas for the summer. Everything that we mentioned, we're going to put in a one pager for you so that you can share it with yourself or you can have it on your computer for those days where you need an activity and you want something quick to refer back to. And with that handout, we'll also send out today's recording. Ty is going to put in the chat just a quick survey link so you can let us know what you thought of today's session, and just knowing that Watersheds Canada is hosting a few more webinars this year through our webinar series. So if you have any topics or speakers that you would be really interested in, that would be the place to tell us. And I think we are right at the hour, so this is great. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Thank you, Kailey, for coming back for a second webinar. And we wish everyone a happy weekend and that you can maybe get some of those 2 hours in for this week with the ideas that you learned today.
Thanks, everyone.